So I got this game in a Steam sale, I would say. Probably the Steam summer sale, but I really didn't bother playing it for a while until closer towards Christmas of 2012, and I actually played this game a lot on the actual Christmas day of 2012. It's a game in a series that I have played one entry previous to this, and I was kind of interested. I didn't actually think to myself that I would really play this game because, you know, when you get games on Steam sale and you kind of think that you want to play it eventually, but you kind of have a feeling that you just won't. It was kind of like that, but I did actually go ahead and play it, and like I said, I played it loads on Christmas Day of 2012, and that game is East Origin. So yeah, I don't really have too much experience with the East series. I actually did play Ark of Napishtim, as you know, previous to this, but I loaded up East Origin, and what I found was actually a game that I liked more than Ark of Napishtim, and I think this is sort of like a side game. From what I can tell, it takes place before the first game, and again, as far as I know, it's the only game in the series where Adol isn't the main character. Instead, you have two characters to pick between, Unica and Hugo, and the story is basically the same on both sides, even though there are slight alterations. But the aim of the game is to get to the top of the tower, and as you progress through the tower you will go through different areas which have their own unique theme. And I think this is something that we don't really see much in games these days, at least not themes this strong into this degree. Like for example, you will reach the water area, and then you'll reach the fire area, and then the sandy area, that type of thing. And it also kind of has a Zelda-esque design in that within each area, if you think of it sort of like a Zelda dungeon, where in order to progress you will need to get a certain item, and in that dungeon, or that area of the tower in this case, you'll find that item and that will allow you to progress. So for example, in the watery area, you will have limited underwater time to breathe, but there's an item you can find which will greatly extend that time, meaning that you can travel through this watery path, this long watery path. And like Ark of Napishtim, it's very fast, your characters are very small, the enemies are very small, and it's very action based in terms of your ability to jump around and attack, and just things jumping around all over the place. It's a very short game if you're measuring that by your ability to start the game from the beginning and reach and defeat the final boss. But I think that this is a game where measuring the game's length by that feature alone is not a very good idea, because this game actually adds an element of gameplay and an element of depth to your difficulty selection, which is really interesting. I'll describe it like this. As you go through the game, you will defeat enemies and you'll pick up these little crystals which will give you SP, and you can use SP at the different save statues, and that will allow you to buy abilities. Most of them are different, like perks, like for example there's one which will allow you to obtain SP faster, and also throughout the game you will get different bits of armor, each with a very strict particular tier to it, and you can power those up individually. And enemies higher up the tower will give you a lot more SP, and so it'll become a lot easier to get all of the high extreme end abilities, and you will get everything, it just takes a little bit of work. But what's amazing about this is that they actually add a twist to this, and this is something that I really like. If you complete the game once with each character, say once with Unica and once with Hugo, you will unlock a third character, Toll, and if you complete it with each character once, you will unlock New Game Plus. And basically what New Game Plus means is that for every character that you've completed it with, on every difficulty setting that you've completed it with, there's 5 difficulty settings overall, you will start the game with a bonus 1000 SP. So say you complete it once with Unica on very easy, once with Hugo on very easy, and once with Toll on very easy. The game will make this sort of checklist to say, yep, you've completed it with this character on this difficulty here, and this character with this one here. And so there's a total of 15 different playthroughs that you can have, one for each character and one for each difficulty, 3 times 5. But there's actually an element of strategy here, because the Nightmare difficulty, which is the highest difficulty in the game, your SP intake does not match your area in the game, enemies at the very end will still give you like 1 or 2 SP, just like the enemies at the start. So naturally, you can only dream of unlocking all the abilities on Nightmare mode. But if you work towards getting this New Game Plus feature and building up each of these different playthroughs, then you can use that starting bonus SP to get several thousand, and it will fundamentally change your approach to the game. Knowing that you start with a lot of SP but will be extremely inefficient at getting more totally changes your approach to actually spending the abilities. And what this also means is that you might have to feel like you have to hold off on upgrading certain armor until you get the higher tier armor, and it's really interesting and I really love it. Also, 2 more things that I really want to compliment this game about. First of all, the music. The music is fantastic. Ys has a very specific musical style and it is really nice. And secondly, I love the boss battles. I love how each character is slightly different enough, but even still, the boss battles are very nice in how it all works. What I mean by that is, for example, Unica will unlock the Wind Elemental ability to do a spin attack, which will allow her to glide through the air, whereas Hugo, his wind ability, will still give him the glide through the air ability which he needs. Because, you know, like I said, it's kind of like a Zelda dungeon in that you'll find the bit where you need a certain ability to pass, and so you'll have to go and unlock that ability or find the piece of equipment or whatever to then be able to utilize it. And so Hugo and Unica both need to have this gliding ability, but whilst Unica does it through this air spinning attack, Hugo will do it through this shield, and so it makes them different, but gives them the same means of progressing through the levels. That's really nice. And I also want to talk about a memory that I have with this game, because like I said, I played it loads on Christmas of 2012, but also I got into listening to the Millencolin album Pennybridge Pioneers, because I was doing this thing where I'd listen to an album that I sort of knew that I liked some songs of, but I wouldn't really be fully aware of it, and I would make myself listen to it over and over again. So I remember playing this game on this Christmas day and listening to that album 5 times, and I really got attached to the song called The Mayfly, which I never really was into before then, but I remember sitting there on my laptop playing Ys Origin, and then whenever the album got to the song The Mayfly, I'd be like, oh yeah, The Mayfly, and I'd like really get into it. Oh, the memories. If you like racing games and you have a 7th generation console, I'll be very surprised if you haven't played this game. And if you haven't played this game, I'm just going to say you should play this game. It was one of my very first PS3 games. Not exactly my first was Oblivion. But this game went through so much support over the years. They released a lot of DLC, which I know is a rather controversial way of saying that that's support, but this game has gone on sale so many times, and you can get it for so cheap. And even now, the Ultimate Collection version, which has all of the DLC, you can get for really cheap. I was actually introduced to this game through my friend Alex from university because he had his Xbox 360, and this was before I had a PS3. It might have been like 2007 or so. And so he showed me this game on it, and I was rather interested because I hadn't really seen a game like this. And so I just sat and watched him play Burnout Paradise. This is sort of like, maybe not necessarily the original open world racing game, but it was certainly the one that I feel really kicked off the movement towards games like that, for better or for worse. But this is certainly the game that introduced me to the whole concept, and I certainly enjoyed it a lot when I got it. So the game starts and you're put into this city called Paradise City, and I always associate this game with the Guns N' Roses song Paradise City because obviously they put it in the game. It's like the main theme for the game. And it's one of those games where there's sort of a lot of passive multiplayer in a way, in that everything will have a sort of high score to it. Every road, it will keep track of your time going through the road, and you can check all of the different scores of all the different people on all of these different events. The way that the main game works is that you have the city, and all the way around the city you will have these different events. So you'll have blue icons, which will just be a straight up race, or you'll have a green icon, which is like a stunt run, and you go up to where these areas are and you can hold the 2 triggers on the Xbox 360 or L2 and R2 on the PS3, and it will activate the level, or the challenge rather. And it can be quite tricky though at times, because sometimes it will just be start here, go here, and sometimes it won't be so clear as to the best route, because it's not like the rest of the world is blocked off. You can still just go anywhere, you just have to get to a certain point. So there's a little bit of map navigation in that. But once you've completed, say, 10 or so of these events, your license will upgrade to the next stage, and then all of the challenges that you've cleared will sort of unclear, ready for you to do them again. So it might be to upgrade your license for the first time, clear 10 events, and then once you've done that, it clears them all off. Now clear 20 events, and you do that, and it clears them all off, and you have to keep doing this until you max out your license. And I really like that feature. The way that you obtain different cars is by taking them out. As you're driving around, you will see other cars whiz by, and you can just crash into them and crash them against a wall, and they will become yours to then be able to use. And there are different types of categories of cars as well. You have the stunt cars, and the stunt cars will gain their turbocharge by doing different stunts. So it might be drifting or jumping up ramps or whatever. There's the destruction carnage themed cars, where you will gain turbocharge just by destroying other cars. And then there's by far my least favourite category of car, which is the speed car. And speed cars, you can't charge them unless their turbo is full, and once the charge has run out, you get an instant refilling of the charge. I find them really tricky to use, and I've never really had a good time with them. But also scattered around the level, you'll have these different billboards for you to fly through, these super jumps for you to try to jump across, and there's also all these different fences scattered around, and you know you'll break through one, and it'll say like, broken 42 of 200 of these fences or whatever. And so this really does fit into the category of game that I think is a really nice category, where you can just play it for a bit, maybe listen to a podcast, listen to some music, and just relax for a couple hours or so. For some reason, I don't remember why exactly, I remember spending a lot of time in the, I think it was like a mining tunnel or something to the north of the map. I think I was doing that because I needed to build up a lot of speed for a challenge or something. I don't remember. I just remember going along that path back and forward quite a lot. But yeah, it is one of those games with lots of icons and stuff and challenges all scattered around a map, which that design is something that I feel is very nice for a specific purpose, but I also feel is something that, I mean, I'm kind of going off topic here, and I will just briefly for a moment say that this sort of like open world design full of icons and collectibles scattered around and stuff, it's a very specific type of design that I think has a home, and it's something that we should sort of, I guess the word is embrace. And you know, I enjoy it at times. I don't have a problem with it, but I do feel that it's overutilized because it doesn't take creativity to make, if you know what I mean. And so it kind of becomes so ubiquitous and so dull that it's sort of used as a sort of like a depth supplement. Like, we don't need to make games with interesting mechanics and stuff because we could just make loads of things and scatter them around. No, I think you need different types of games for different types of moods, and this is a very good game for that particular type of mood that you might be in. So this is a game that is very popular and liked by a lot of people, and quite clearly I like it a lot as well. I just feel that a lot of the claims that people make about what makes this game really good sometimes really fall short, and I very strongly disagree with a lot of those things, which I will go into. But this is a game that I never had myself, but I borrowed it from my brother and I was able to play it. Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. This is generally considered to be the best Paper Mario game. Best way I think I can describe this game is that it's a turn-based RPG, and it has lots of gimmicky battle things, and I'm going to call them gimmicky battle things. You obviously have the main character Mario, and throughout your journey you will acquire different guests as sort of like your secondary party member, and you can switch the secondary party member in the middle of battle. And what's nice about this game is that there is a level of depth in this game. It's not like they've removed depth, because I still feel that there's enough going on there, but it does add that element of sort of strategy and interesting interactions of the different variables. But each enemy is specifically designed to be vulnerable to certain attacks or immune to certain attacks, and so you get very different but very similar abilities, but different enough in that it's clear that you have to use them at different times. For example, Mario has a jump attack where he'll run up and he'll jump on the enemy, and if you press A at the right time when you land on the enemy, you will do extra damage. And there's also a hammer attack where you have to hold the analog stick back and then let go when the thing flashes so that you will do extra damage. But what really makes these different attacks different is that you will have different enemies that are immune to certain things. So for example, if an enemy is wearing a spiky hat or just is spiky in general, then trying to jump on it will hurt Mario. And I honestly think, and I just want to get the negatives out of the way, let's just get this out of the way out right now, okay? Pressing a button at the right time when you're doing an attack is nothing. It's not this great innovation. It doesn't make RPGs more involving, as people would like to put it. No, it really, really doesn't. It's such a minor thing. It's like a quick time event, sort of. Not really, but sort of. And I think that people say that this game is a lot more involving because of times button presses and all that. I think it's ridiculous. To be honest, if you didn't have to press A at the right time when jumping or holding the analog stick back to do a hammer attack, I would not think the game is any worse for it. Although granted, you do unlock a more powerful hammer attack where it is a little bit harder, so I'm not saying that there's no variables there. There are variables. I just think it's very, very minor and not something that people should rant and rave about. But you do have these different variables during battle. For example, you will have FP, which is sort of like your MP, which you'll need to spend to use certain different types of attacks. And these different attacks, the gimmicky stuff, things that you would need to make them do, some of them do take skill. There is a skill element to it, such as the one where all of these different icons are falling from the roof of the level and your target is moving up and down and you have to like shoot things to hit these bonuses, and you got to try to avoid the bad ones. It's decent enough. It's not a terrible thing. And the attack where you have to sort of draw an outline around the enemy in order to do more damage, again, that does add an extra variable to the mix, because it means that obviously the larger enemies are going to be stronger against that particular attack, because it's going to take more time and therefore more resources in order to be able to effectively hit them with this attack. And so I think that these types of gimmicks and stuff are justified in a sense, but I really think they are so overplayed and I think it's ridiculous. You also have this extra element of star power, where if you appeal to the audience, then you will get lots of stars, and then you can use different types of attacks which use a different type of resource. And you can have abilities that will affect the audience in that way, and it's pretty nice. When you level up, you will have to choose whether you want BP, HP or FP. BP meaning badge points, which is sort of like the resource that you have to dish out between your different badges, which are sort of like your passive abilities. So that's pretty nice. But there are also things around that you can use to your advantage, like there's a character somewhere who will allow you to redistribute your levels in different ways to alter your stats around. And you will also unlock different powers. Well, they're called curses, but there are like different powers that you will unlock as you go around, and you will have to do that sort of Metroidvania-esque style exploration thing where you'll have to go back to previous areas where you didn't have a power before, but now you do, so you can get through the bars by turning into a bit of sideways paper to slip through and all that lot. The bit that I wasn't keen on much were the actual star pieces that you find. I like having hidden things in games. I like having different collectibles that might be in awkward positions. You got to think, how do I get to that, or how have I got to work out these different puzzles in order to reach a particular item. I like it when you have puzzles like that, but what I don't like about it in this game is that they just hide them behind things. So it's all because of the way that the camera is, so you might have like a pipe coming out of the ground and there'll be one of these star pieces behind the pipe, and so it just becomes a question of check behind every nook and cranny. as opposed to actually, I suppose, looking around, if that makes sense. I don't know if I am making sense, but basically what I'm trying to say is you don't have to necessarily think about the environment or think about different ways to get things. You just have to think about where things are hidden in relation to the camera, and I think that itself isn't that interesting. One part of this game which I never really got to do because I didn't complete it, but really did interest me, was the Pit of 100 Trials, because there's a part where you can go down this different series of pipes and you'll face off against different enemies, and you have to go down, and when you get to the bottom there's like a super boss. And if you know me, you know I love all that stuff where you're gonna like go through like big challenges or long trials and there's like a really hard boss at the end. I love that sort of stuff.